Good evening. Welcome to the Farming Podcast brought to you by Private Property. My name is Mbali Nwoko, your host, every Tuesdays and Thursdays right here at 8 p.m. on the Farming Podcast brought to you by Private Property. Today we're speaking Undercover Farming with Greenhouse Technologies. I'm joined by two gentlemen. One is Deon de Kock, who is the sales manager at Greenhouse Technology and technical manager at Greenhouse Technologies. I'm joined by Heinrich Muller. And we're going to unpack undercover farming. Do I invest in tunnels? Do I invest in shade nets? What type of crops do I farm undercover? What type of, how do I maintain maybe the structures during winter, and what heating systems can I incorporate in my production processes when I farm undercover? These are some of the questions that our guests, you guys watching us tonight, have brought in the previous episodes that we've had onto the podcast. And so if you've been interested in undercover farming or are looking to start an investment in an undercover farm, this episode is just for you. So as always, please like, share, and comment on our podcast. And we're always happy to answer your questions live on the podcast. And, we get the experts to answer your questions directly. But without further ado, let's get on to it. Let me greet the two gentlemen from Greenhouse Technologies. Deon, Heinrich, how are you doing? Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Nice talking to you.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So I just want to start with maybe Deon, right? Just give us a brief breakdown of what does Greenhouse Technologies do for anybody who's never heard of Greenhouse Technologies before?
Yeah, so we've the business started about 14 years ago. Next year it will be 15 years. Originally started with greenhouse plastic, and then obviously expanded from there. So currently, to sum it up, obviously we do a wide range of products, but currently it's basically greenhouse plastic, and that's roof plastic plus then floor plastic for greenhouses, irrigation, mostly drip irrigation, but other irrigation as well. Then growing substrates, which is a combination of peat, Coco Peat or Koya, and then obviously different blends. And then controllers, fertigation units. So there's a list of things, but that's our core product. So obviously our market is aimed at mostly flower growers, vegetable farmers, undercover farmers, obviously, blueberry farmers, citrus farmers. That's basically the clients that we serve.
Awesome, fantastic. 14 years is quite a long time, so you've definitely been around the block and are quite experienced as a company. And then I just want to move on to Heinrich.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Sure.
So now I just wanted to, obviously, you said 14 years, and obviously at this point in time, we started in Joburg and then obviously grew from there. So currently we do have branches in Western Cape, Eastern Cape, KZN, Nelspruit, and then we've got a rep in Groblersdal as well. And then obviously Heinrich is technical, but he's also in charge of exports, which is mostly Botswana, Namibia, those countries. Sorry, I forgot that. I just obviously wanted to add that as well.
No problem. I think that helps a lot because, we have people listening from all over the show, in the country. So it's always great to know that you've got different branches and can help farmers in various geographic regions. To Heinrich, the topic for this evening is undercover farming. And, seems like everybody wants to invest in tunnels or in shade nets. Maybe just expand this term undercover farming. What does the term undercover farming mean exactly? And why would a farmer decide to go undercover as opposed to open land?
Thank you, Mabali. Undercover actually just means it's either under shade net, plastic, or virus net. So what you achieve with that is to keep the elements out, which will be cold, rain, frost. So it all depends on what area you're farming on, what crop you're farming on, or what crop you're farming. So it's a more controlled environment you are farming. So if you want to control the temperature, the humidity, and other factors like that.
Awesome. And, Deon mentioned that one of your specialities as greenhouse technologies is plastic tunnels. Maybe can you take us through the specifications of those plastic tunnels greenhouse technology offers to farmers, and what can one grow in those plastic tunnels?
Well, in South Africa, your standard tunnel is a 10 by 30 meter tunnel. That's the standard in South Africa. The standard in South Africa will have closed sides as well. But more and more people are using tunnels, which is a lot higher, and where you can actually roll the sides up. That's just for better ventilation and better control of temperature. And then, price-wise, you can go from a very cheap structure, growing just tomatoes or growing some lettuce and that. You can go to a very expensive structure growing cannabis. So there's a wide variety of applications and a price difference in what you're going to do. But my advice would be is your structure will also be, it all depends on where you are. If you're in Limpopo, for an example, you'll have a lot higher structures, and if you go to a place like Sanin, a lot of the structures in Sanin are actually open on the sides, just for the heat and for the humidity and for ventilation. So I'll say that every province or every area, there are differences in their structures. There's not a one size fits all, or there's not one solution for everybody.
Oh, okay. And that was actually going to be my next question, to say, is it a viable business option to build structures in very hot areas, because you're thinking plastic, and crops could get quite hot underneath plastic.
Yes.
But now you're mentioning the different aspects of ventilation. But is it still a good investment, even though there's ventilation on the sides, to build greenhouse infrastructure in very, very hot areas?
Yeah, there definitely is. But it must also be understood that we sell about 20 to 25 different plastic films for the greenhouses as well. Some of them will only have like a 10% shade, and we go up to a 70% shade. So people that are growing like indoor plants, we supply them with plastic that's got a 70% shade in the plastic already. So it also all depends if you're going for mainly summer production or winter production, because you're also not going to have a film that is going to produce the best results for summer and winter. You must decide what's your target market, what do you want to benefit from the most. Do you want more sunlight in, or do you want a cooler film? And then we can advise you accordingly.
Right. Thank you, Heinrich. Deon, as a sales manager for Greenhouse Technologies, we may have farmers currently watching this evening who have been growing or producing, vegetables or whatever it is that they're growing in open field. And now when it comes to thinking about having some form of crop protection, like putting infrastructure, whether it's tunnels or shade nets, a significant amount of planning is required in that. Tell me, what is that sales process or that customer process that you take a farmer who wants to invest in structures? Do you sit with them and maybe, understand their business, what type of crop, and then do you then advise what type of tunnels, together as a team, I suppose, with Heinrich behind the scenes? Just maybe break us through that sales process, or assisting a farmer to make the right investment and have the right tunnels when they're looking to go into undercover farming.
Yeah, so what we do is we don't, I know our name says Greenhouse Technologies, but we don't actually build structures or supply structures, but we do have a list of contractors and companies that we work with that do that. So what we'll usually do is, obviously, those guys know what they do, but also we have Herman in-house, who's obviously, he's got a lot of experience when it comes to structures. So obviously we use him just as almost on a consultation basis with some of these guys, although we don't build the structures. So if we go and see a new client and they want to obviously start a business or build a structure, then we'll obviously advise, although we won't build the structure ourselves. So we'll advise as far as possible. And I think what's important, it's before you just go and build a structure, I think it's important to obviously decide on crop, because there's obviously a different, like Heinrich said, there's a massive difference between growing something like, say,
It seems like we're having some technical difficulties this evening with our guests. So far, if you've just joined us, we are speaking Undercover Farming with Greenhouse Technologies. I'm joined by Deon, which is a sales manager at Greenhouse, and Heinrich Muller, which is a technical manager. And so far, before we just got interrupted, I'll just give them 2 minutes or so just to get back onto the line. And so far, we've just been talking about the term or the definition undercover farming. What does it mean? And Heinrich was able to give us some information in terms of the different structures and the different forms and the different ventilation methods you could build in your tunnels. But it all depends on the farmer, your geographic region, the crop that you're farming, and there's not one size fits all model when it comes to greenhouses. But the standard, as Heinrich said, is that it's a 10 by 30 meter structure, which is 300 square meters in size. And then Deon was able to inform us that greenhouse technology is based nationally in South Africa in various geographic regions. So if you are looking to procure something from Greenhouse Technology, I'm sure there are in a very close region near you. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I see that you're back onto the line. I just want to quickly test if you both can hear me. You could just give me a thumbs up before I proceed to my next question. Okay. Awesome. Heinrich, I want to ask in terms of, there's been a growing trend of people building greenhouse structures and so forth. Ideally, in vegetable farming, what are the most popular and profitable crops to grow under greenhouses? As people always want to know, how can I get my return on investment much quicker?
I'm going to answer that in a different way. The thing is, if you're a smaller scale farmer, it's very difficult for him to compete in the open market or sending his stuff to the market. So I've seen the areas, the smaller guys, it's actually more profitable for them to just send to their local supermarkets or to get local contracts. Where a lot of the guys in the commercial or the bigger farmers, they've already got contracts with the supermarkets. They deliver to the DCs and that. So I'll say the target market for both of them are not the same.
Okay. And what would small be in this case, even from a tunnel perspective? Is it a smaller farmer, maybe farming in 5 tunnels or in 10? What would small be in this case?
I'll say up to 10 tunnels. Up to 10 tunnels, I'll say it's a smaller farmer. We've got some of our farmers who've got multi-spans. Multi-spans is where the bays are next to each other. Some of them are growing in like 15, 20, 25 hectares. So I'll say 2 of them have got different markers actually.
Right. And you brought on something that I thought I would have forgotten this evening about multi-spans. What are the pros and cons of building in a multi-span versus a single tunnel? Is it based on a crop or is it based on just the climate in that area? What would make me decide to go for multi-span as opposed to single bay structures?
I'll say it's a progression. A lot of the farmers started with a tunnel and then later went to a multi-span. The reason why the multi-span is better because you can go to a lot higher height. So you can trellis a lot higher. So if you're growing a crop like tomatoes or peppers or something, you can go a lot higher. Mm-hmm. Your control and temperature is a lot easier in your bigger structure. And you can also then spend the money for a big controller and put ventilation or natural ventilation or forced ventilation. So I'll just say it's high technology, but you can also get higher returns and get a lot more right with it, with a multi-span than a tunnel.
With the multi-span, doesn't the risk then increase as well from like pests and diseases because, it's not enclosed? I suppose if you're spraying on one end, the pests can quickly migrate to the other end. So doesn't that expose your plants a lot more from a pest and disease infestation?
A lot of my multi-span growers are actually going to natural predators. So lots of them are actually the ventilation on top. If they got top ventilation or they got side ventilation, they're actually putting in virus netting and that to keep whitefly and other pests out. And then they actually have natural predators that they are using in the greenhouses. So I've seen the last, let's say, 10 years in the greenhouse industry that they're going a lot more for natural predators and not spraying so much anymore.
I see, I see. And another thing before I move on to maybe ask Deon a question, Heinrich, is I've been curious to find out as well, during the winter months, especially a lot of farmers who are growing undercover would say, have heating systems, etc. How viable is it from a business perspective to have heating systems during winter month? And given the fact that the prices for crops, don't change that much every year. So I'm sure it must eat a lot into your operational costs or expenses on a monthly basis to have heating systems in place.
Yeah, look, I've also seen that a lot more people that were heating are not heating anymore. And on the same side, with forced air cooling, that they've got like a pad and fan system, a lot of people are actually taking that out and they're putting in natural ventilation, or they're ventilating the houses naturally because of rising costs. And that's also why a lot of the crops are actually area specific, where a lot of the tomatoes are grown like in Limpopo, and a lot of the peppers are actually grown from Malanga and other areas. So if you're going to be like, let's say, in Gauteng and Johannesburg, and you need to fill your contracts with supermarkets and that, some of the guys have got no other choice than to heat. And most of the heating they are using is still with coal. They're using with coal, and they've got hot water that are pumping through tubes on the floor. Where the older technology used to be air to air, is where they heat the air up and then they blow the air through the greenhouse. But then you've got other problems with pests and also with diseases. So a lot of the guys are preferring to do pipes in the greenhouses and run hot water through them, or radiators.
I see. It's such an interesting concept. I wish I could see it live, just to put things into perspective here. Deon, I just want to move on to you. I assume you travel a lot. You meet many farmers, on the field. You speak to them about their operations. What have been some of the trends around greenhouse or undercover farming that you've picked up? Like, what are farmers looking to do where their greenhouses are concerned to increase or expand their production? And maybe are farmers moving from vegetables to fruit, or from fruit to vegetables? Just tell us, what are some of the trends that are happening on the ground directly from the farmers? You're just on mute.
Can I answer that for you?
Okay, sure. I think Deon's just on mute.
The biggest move I've seen is that there's a lot more guys going into export. So either export blueberries, or the citrus industry is massive in South Africa. And in the next, let's say, 10 years, they're nearly going to double the production for export. So there's a lot more crops coming into export, like raspberries, blueberries, gooseberries. There's a big drive in the berry market because it's like a health food. And then in South Africa, we have started the beginning. There's a beginning of the cannabis industry, which can be a massive employer and also revenue for this country.
Right.
So we, as technologies and other guys in the industry, we're actually waiting for like the cannabis market also to really get going, and that we also can get involved in.
So are you saying that with building greenhouse structures, it's more lucrative now based on, market trends and demands to export, especially with superfruits, because of the return on investment, maybe per kilogram, etc.? And if more people are moving on to export now, who are the farmers that are going to continue farming, your carrots, your cabbages, the staple vegetables that really hold this economy down?
No, we still have that. It's just that the biggest growth that I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years has actually been the export market.
Yeah.
A lot more.
Can I just
structures exporting?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mbali, sorry, can I just add there? Obviously, exactly what Heinrich said. I think what is important is a lot of people always ask you, what's the crop that you can make money with? And I know there's highs and lows. So I know currently there's cannabis and blueberries, exactly what Heinrich said. But I also think a lot of people sometimes make the mistake that they want to jump from one crop to another crop. But there's definitely preferred crops that, like Heinrich said, especially on the export market. I think from a practical side, I think farmers are getting more penny wise. They are looking to automate, maybe cut costs, And that's a challenge for us as well, because we're importing. And obviously we need to see where we can give better solutions, better cost without cutting quality, because I think that's probably a mistake that guys make. They want to cut costs, but in the end they cut on the quality as well. So I think farmers are definitely more cost sensitive. But then, I think in terms of what the Heinrich said, 100% accurate. Export market, blueberries, cannabis is going to be huge. As soon as that can get going, citrus obviously massive. But that's scale. That's massive farmers.
You see, and it goes back to what I was saying, to say, as much as a farmer could see such opportunities, export markets, superfoods, seeing very, very great big trends, how does greenhouse technologies come in making sure that the farmer is making the right investment? Because, we've seen many other projects being built, maybe, for example, cannabis farming, and you find that this is just an example, then you find that their contract falls out, and then you've got this massive structure that you've put an investment in, but now you can't grow anything else. So at what point would a farmer then have to come to greenhouse and say, I'm looking to build X type of structures for X specific crop? Would you then send them to the partners that you work with, maybe to provide a turnkey solution or some business strategy, and then they would buy the material from greenhouse? Is that correct? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so I'll say sorry, Heinrich?
Boy, the thing is, everything is crop specific.
Yeah.
So if you build a structure, it will actually, let's say you build a blueberry structure, a shade net blueberry structure, it will be put up exactly for blueberries. So if you're going to change it to any other crop, you will have to change certain things. So usually if we advise a structure or we advise a tunnel or a multi-span, it will be for a specific crop. So if you're going to grow stuff that you're going to trellis, they've got a lot higher load capacity because you have to trellis them, and the weight has to be carried off the structure. So then again, everything is built specifically for a crop.
Yeah. Deon, you wanted to say something there as well?
Lost my thought process there. Sorry, you were asking about sorry. So obviously, like I said, we don't do structures. Obviously, we consult a lot. So we'll consult typically, like Heinrich said. Now we'll say, okay, what do you want to grow? What's the plans? And then obviously make suggestions in terms of we'll go with this medium, with this structure, and then obviously refer to the relevant parties or the relevant companies or contractors that can help them. So like with the irrigation, we don't do the design. So obviously refer to guys that can do a proper irrigation plan design. And then obviously the same with the structure. So obviously we'll consult with them, advise them on the technical side, obviously like with Heinrich there. Obviously with all his knowledge, he adds a lot in terms of that. And then obviously then he needs to take it there. So I don't think it's we advise and consult, but when it comes to turnkey projects, then obviously I don't want to say we outsource it because we're not involved with the project, but we then obviously refer to the relevant guys that we deal with, and that we know that's up to do the job. So.
All right. And I want to ask Heinrich, once the shade net structures or the greenhouse are put up, how long should a good structure last a farmer before they have to replace maybe, the wood, the nets, the plastic, etc.? What's the standard life cycle of a good structure that's been erected on a farm?
Look, I'll say a shade net, if you're not getting big hail or big winds on that, it must at least last you, let's say, 10 years, or a total of 10 years. Where our plastic, we've got a warranty on our plastic for 3 years. That will typically last you 4 or 5 years. But I always tell the guys, rather change the plastic every 4 years, because there's other properties in the plastic that are losing. They're losing light and they're losing production. But the structure, if you build a good multi-span structure, that will last you for, I know structures that have been here for 40, 50 years already. And the guys are still growing in there. So your more expensive structures, yes, it is more expensive to start off with. But if you see how long you've got use of it, then it is, in the long run, you're actually saving.
Yeah, I heard you mention something about changing the plastics every 4 years because they lose that light. Does the plastic itself deteriorate over some time?
Now look, you get your UV, your ultraviolet light that you call degrades your plastic. So it actually makes the color like opal. So let's say you've got a 85% total light transmission, the light coming through the plastic. Then it will lose some of those properties. So instead of 85%, it will only be 82% to 81%.
Got it. Oh, thank you so much, Heinrich. Deon, my last question for you this evening is, you mentioned something about when people farm in greenhouses, they either opt for Coco Peat, Koya, and there's many various substrates to grow onto. What are just some of the, maybe just if you could list them again and just maybe add some pros and cons. I'm a farmer growing in bags, as you know, but currently using sawdust, and would want to migrate eventually to using Coco Peat. But just for people that don't know the technicalities around that, what are some of the pros and cons of farming in Coco Peat versus sawdust? I think that we've lost Deon now, but I'm sure, Heinrich, you could answer that question.
See, Mabali, sawdust doesn't really hold water, so the water holding capacity is a lot lower. And then let's say the standard size for growing in sawdust is actually 11 liters. If you're using a crop or you're growing like in Koya, you can actually go down to a 5.5 liter bag and get the same and even better results. We can go to a peat bag and actually go for a 4 liter bag and also have the same results. So it's all about the airflow porosity, which is the AFP, and then also the cation and anion exchange capacity of the medium, where sawdust nearly has nothing. So you over irrigate the whole time. You've got a lot of cycles and all the water you're losing, and you're losing all the nutrients as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so just to sum that up again, obviously sawdust, you're losing a lot of water. It doesn't have great water retention. And when you're losing a lot of water, you're obviously spending a lot from fertilizer and electricity because you're adding more cycles. And what I heard you say is that you're buying slightly smaller bags if you're using the Coco Peat. So I think maybe there must be a little bit of cost saving where that is concerned, as opposed to 11 liter bags that could hold much, like almost twice the capacity of that of Coco Peat or Koya.
Yes.
And what's the difference between this term Coco Peat or Koya? Is it the same thing or different?
No. Peat is actually stagnant peat. So stagnant peat, the peat that we sell is between 2,500 and 3,000 years old, which is sphagnum. The sphagnum we sell is Sphagnum pepersolium, that's a genus and species, where Coco Peat is actually Koya. And Koya is from a coconut husk and a Koya in it, and that's a product that's 2 years old. So people always get confused to think that peat is Coco Peat. That's not Coco Peat. It's actually called Coco pith. So the pith is the little balls that are between the husks of the coconut. So it's not the same. So peat is 2,500 years old. The only mistake you can make with that is overwatering it. So it's very stable. It's got very high buffering capacity. And the only salt or fertilizer in it's the one that we add in it. Where Koya, it's got very sodium form and also potassium obstacle there. But the rewatering of Koya is the best of any medium. So if you want to dry a medium out and rewater it, then Koya is the best medium you can use.
Right. And my last question for this evening as we wrap up the show, which has been so great, gentlemen, is I want to ask Heinrich, with the Koya or the peat, for how long could you keep it on in your greenhouses and continue certain cycles as opposed to sawdust, which you have to replace every year?
Look, it all depends on what crop you are growing. Some guys growing peppers, they actually use the bags for 2 years. Okay. And I've seen guys that try to use it 2 or 3 times for like cucumbers. That doesn't work. And then also for tomatoes, because you do get diseases in the Koya. Yes. But some guys use some of the Koya and top the bags up again, and they use a product like methampsodium to clean it or to sterilize it and reuse it. Yeah. But it's mostly in the peppers and other other crops that the guys reuse it more than once.
Yeah.
Just for diseases and for like a crop in tomatoes. It's sometimes it's better to start clean.
To start clean. Wow.
Yeah.
And people think that farming is just putting a plant in the soil, it grows, and then everybody's happy. There's so much technical things that one has to really, really think about, from structures to irrigation to the type of growing mediums. And we know that, certain areas right now don't have the best soils anymore. A lot of the soils have deteriorated, erosion, etc. And so obviously trying to go the soilless route is it does look attractive. However, it does also come with some financial planning that is required in the entire production. But gentlemen, it's been great to have you. I know this conversation went quite fast and we didn't tackle some other aspects maybe that needed to be broken down for some of our audience, but I think we've just got the gist of the basics of undercover farming, what greenhouse technology does, the service offering, and it's a lot of materials around greenhouse farming rather. And it's good to know that greenhouse has people like Heinrich, who are technologically, I think, informed in the various greenhouse structures versus various crops. And I think what puts ease and comfort to me is knowing that you've been around for many, many years, for more than a decade. So you've obviously seen many farmers come and go, and then with them farming different type of crops and seeing the various trends, not only in South Africa, but outside our borders as well. And so, I think that is it for me tonight. Thank you so much for your expertise and for your time this evening. I wish you a very good night ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mbali. Have a wonderful night.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Heinrich. Deon, can you hear us? Ooh, I think he has himself on mute there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Yes. Sorry. Sorry about that. No, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the invitation. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time. And let's do this again. But thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the next time I should come out to Greenhouse and we actually show the people, for example, coir, the difference between coir and peat.
Yeah.
The bags, etc. Because again, farming is very visual. And people might need to think spatially around their farms and how it's based. But thank you for your time, and we'll definitely be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Heinrich.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it, Mbali. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. That was Heinrich and Deon from Greenhouse Technologies, and we were speaking about undercover farming. Everything to know about undercover farming, the different structures you need to have, whether it's greenhouse, plastic tunnels, or shade net structures, the various crops that you could farm. And as the two gentlemen were saying, is that it really is crop specific and area specific. But what I could encourage you to do as a farmer, if you're looking to make an investment in greenhouse or start off initially just farming under greenhouses, is that I think do as much as due diligence that you possibly can. Speak to various service providers, speak to Greenhouse Technologies. They will connect you with the right people to advise you on turnkey solutions and good strategies based on your business outcome, because it is based on the crop, your area, etc. And various tunnels come in different shapes and sizes and heights as well. And so if you have any questions, please reach out to the Greenhouse Technologies crew. Go to their website, and they've got various branches as well. And so, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I hope we can unpack this topic once again, but in a lot more detail, and have some visual presentation for you to see in terms of what the gentlemen were talking about, if you just didn't understand the difference between Coco Peat and coir, etc. But that's it for me tonight. Join me on Thursday, as I am going to be joined by another wonderful guest and talking all things farming. That's it for me. Have a good evening. Take care. you.